I'm Josh Hutchinson. She's Sarah Jack, and this is Witch Hunt Podcast.
Welcome back to our Podcasthon series, Ending Witch Hunts.
Today, we pick up the full story of witch hunting by discussing contemporary witch hunts across the globe, and we're focusing on Africa in this one.
Podcasthon is a global movement to spread the word about charities by podcasts all over the world. Today, from us, you'll hear about charities that have been featured on our podcast in previous expert interviews.
Yeah, we talked, of course, about our own charity in witch hunts.
Today, you're going to hear from advocate Leo Igwe from Advocacy for Alleged Witches.
We've also talked about the Sierra Leone Association for Persons with Albinism.
One of our very first advocacy episodes was from Advocacy Against Witch Hunts in South Africa.
We'll also talk about Stop Child Witch Accusations.
And in Ghana, Total Life Enhancement Center and the Senate Institute.
Yes. And we'll talk about Humanist Malawi.
And Alzheimer's Dementia Namibia.
And from an upcoming episode, the Source of the Nile Union of Persons with Albinism. Please support these organizations. We'll have more information on them later in the podcast, and we'll have the links in the show notes. And then after today, you still get 4 more Podcasthon episodes.
I'm so excited to keep doing this. It's been very enjoyable making these. Yeah. Earlier this week, we were in preparation for Podcasthon. We connected with human rights advocate Dr. Leo Igwe from Advocacy for Alleged Witches in Nigeria.
Leo's been our guest on 2 episodes in the past, so be sure to check those out later as well.
Leo Igwe, thank you so much for coming on to Witch Hunt Podcast today and giving us an update. But first, I want to thank you for all of your hard work every day and for the education that you've given us and for coming to Witch Hunt to tell us what's going on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Sarah. It's my pleasure, Josh. And thank you also for the work you are doing, out there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What priorities is Advocacy for Alleged Witches focused on in 2025?
We have the following priorities. First of all, is to always be there for the accused. Yes. We want to be sure that anytime we get to know that anybody is accused anywhere within Nigeria or beyond, we will say something, we will respond, we will react. Because that ties into our mission in terms of trying to recalibrate the way accusations of witchcraft they are managed. Because often when people are accused, it fizzles out. And the person is either killed or the person is punished or the person is thrown into jail and nobody hears about it. So it's still our priority to be there and be able to intervene as soon as we get to know that somebody is accused or somebody is persecuted, or as we have seen in Zambia, some people were charged to court because they were accused they were attempting to kill the president, using witchcraft. And very often, it is still the news of the accusers that what dominates the media. So we will now have to challenge the accusers, try to highlight the gaps either in their claims or the baseless nature of the allegations that bring in. Yes, provide a counter narrative. That still remains our priority in 2025. Another thing we're also doing is begin to let organizations or institutions that either promote human rights, the rights of women and children, like the International Federation of Women Lawyers, they call them FIDA. They have offices in Nigeria in all the 36 states, and they have offices across the region. But of course, they have not mainstreamed the human rights of people who are accused. So we are trying this year to get them to understand that the human rights of women and children who are accused of witchcraft should be part of their activities. They should mainstream that. So the same thing we are doing with our national human rights institutions, because Every country has a national human rights institution. It's managed by the states, even though they claim to be independent. But too often, they don't, focus on these areas. So what we are trying to do is to draw the attention to it, let them understand that it is something very important. In fact, some of them are promoting what they call SGV, sexual and gender-based violence. And they make a lot of noise about SGV, focusing maybe on rape and domestic violence. But they have forgotten that witch hunting is also a form of domestic violence because it's perpetrated within the home. It has a gender dimension because women are often the ones who are targeted, who are beaten. But over the years, for some reasons, of course, because many of them believe or suspect that the accused, are what they are accused of, so they do not focus in this area. So one of the things we are doing is to get them to mainstream the rights of accused persons because that helps us. That helps us in our work because we are not going to do this alone. We need other institutions, the police, the human rights institutions, the CSOs. We also want to get them on our side so that it will be very easy for us to intervene because sometimes when we want to intervene, we're always looking for a partner organization on ground. We're all looking for a civil society organization on ground that will help us intervene, support the accused. But when they are not sensitized enough, when they have not bought into the fact that the rights of alleged witches are human rights, it's always difficult to bring them on board and get them to support, the accused people. So this is our priority. In addition to our normal everyday activity, like speaking out, and trying to educate the people, trying to let them understand that witchcraft beliefs, yes, they're widely held, but they are false. Because in my own part of the world, they think that if you have held a belief for a very long time, it means that it is true. Or if so many people hold a belief, it means that it is true. Because sometimes they mistake, that majority. Oh, we are the majority. They think that is true. Yeah. But we know that that is not the case. So we also try to educate the people, reorient them, because that is how we can weaken the grip of this belief in their minds. These are our priorities this year, and we hope that it's going to help us reinforce our efforts to stamp out witch hunts.
Do you want to share any experiences that the victims are having?
Yeah, we have a couple of them. And let me just tell you the one that just last week. In fact, by this time last week, I was in Ondo State in southwest Nigeria, meeting with the state chapter of the National Human Rights Commission, just to further what I've just said. And one woman who listened to a radio program I did came around and told us how she was accused when she was a child, about 7 years old. And according to her, a family relative said she was in a dream and saw them in a coven. I saw her and the sister in a coven, and now came back and informed the parents. So she said that in the night, instead of allowing them to sleep, they would tell them to kneel down. Instead of going to bed, they were told to kneel down. And after some time, they would doze off. And the parents would doze off. And when the parents wake up in the night, they don't beat them again to wake up, that they should come back from the coven. Because for the parents, sleeping means going to the coven. That was how the parents interpreted it. So they were beaten at night, denied their sleep by their parents. And she said that even when she went to school, so they told them there that she was a witch and other students couldn't sit with her because in schools they have benches. They don't sit in single seats. So you have to sit about 3 or 4 people on a bench. But because of the accusation, nobody could sit with her. And they were taunting her, made the life miserable for her throughout. And she told me that even when she wanted to get married, that a man came around, and when they traveled to meet the parents, one of them identified her as a witch, and that was the end of that the first time she wanted to marry. She shared the story. But of course, there were still people in the audience who were saying that, that there was still something like witchcraft experience. And another woman said that, well, even though that she felt pity of, felt sorry for the lady's experience, that on her own side, that she was on a wheelchair for about 4 years, 3-4 years. And according to her, it was as a result of witchcraft from the village. That's what she said at the meeting. And I quickly raised my hand. I told her that the Pope was on a wheelchair, that the Pope still goes around on a wheelchair. And some people chuckled. So, because for her, some people were responsible for her being on a wheelchair. And I told her it's a medical issue and it has to be something that they would fix there. Because she said after some time, she stopped moving around on a wheelchair. According to her, the witchcraft had gone back to the people who were responsible. Because she said there that some of those people, some of them were bedridden, and some of them were sick and things like that. So you can imagine on one side, somebody is sharing experience of the maltreatment and abuse. And on another side, somebody is sharing experience to also legitimize the accusations and all that. And this is actually typical of many of our meetings. So as we are having on one hand, people sharing experiences of the torture, maltreatment, and violations they suffered or were subjected to, there were people on the other end who will be telling you, no, I went through this and we have this, somebody bewitched me. So what we do at that on such occasion is, of course, counseling and let people understand that they are explaining a real problem with a false belief or a false narrative. So it's always hard. It's always hard, but it is that hard job we need to do. Otherwise, this morning I had a radio program, and one of the people that anchored the program was saying that witchcraft belief has led to a kind of desensitization. People don't have feelings for the accused because of the belief. So we are trying to resensitize people and let them understand that they have gotten desensitized as a result of mistaken false belief. Yes. And that is the hard job. And if we don't, this is a hard job that must be done. Otherwise, we are not going to make a lot of progress in terms of protecting the accused, defending the accused, and ensuring that the accused are not subjected to any further harm. So this is an ongoing work, because, of course, a lot of people will not be convinced, especially when they have already made up their mind or they have seen a connection between their getting ill and recovery with their supposed idea of witchcraft or harmful magic being perpetrated by people.
That really highlights so much of what is going on, the different aspects of why people make accusations in the first place, and also the lived experience of somebody who's been accused. It was must have been such a powerful story when she told it, so moving. It shows how those accusations stay with you for life, because
Yes.
she's not allowed to marry because of it, what happened in her childhood.
Yeah, actually, she eventually got married, but the first attempt failed. And she also told us that they will be beating them and they're trying to compel them to confess, say who took them to the meeting. And that she now also told us that sometimes they had to lie. They had to lie. Initially, the accused, they said that it was their auntie, that took them to the meeting. So when they went and invited, the woman denied. And now they now said it was a grandmother. So you can see it. This lady, a woman, the auntie, a woman, the grandmother, also a woman. You see how, first of all, it's a lie. These children were forced to say these things. But she said it because they would be beating them so much. And for them to really get them to stop beating, they had to tell them a lie. She was like telling us that they were forcing them to lie. And lie, not just only tell lies about what they are doing, also tell lies against other people, implicate other people, relatives, and all that. So you can see how the whole thing goes from one stage to another and continues to spread. So she was angry, not only that she was accused, but that she was also forced to implicate innocent people and all that. So she had this kind of feeling of guilt and all that, which I think is part of the thing that has complicated her trauma, because she stayed in a family where they tortured her, not just only to tell lies, but also lie against other people.
Yeah. We're really starting to identify how much coercion is a part of witchcraft accusations. Thank you so much for what you shared today. I wanted, before you go, can you tell us a little bit about how you support the victims and how listeners can make donations to your work?
What we do is that the support is on case-by-case basis. So immediately we get any particular, like the one we got last week, we are discussing, we think that first of all, she needs some psychotherapy or some kind of a psychosocial support in terms of, she needs an environment that allows her to speak, because she told us that she had never told the story. She had been looking for an opportunity where she could really pour it out and tell the people what's been going on and all that. And in fact, when she was narrating the story, that was last week, she broke down twice. And she was telling the people that they should not be taking this thing for granted, because very often when they're discussing witchcraft, occasionally you see people laugh and chuckle. So she made it clear that this thing is destroying people's life and it's not something that they would take for granted or think that it was a joke or something light. So what we try to do is that in this case now, we're trying to find maybe a counselor or psychotherapist or somebody who could visit to provide her some support. And we also have situations where when people are banished, we try to get them alternative apartment or accommodation, then give them some money to start a business. If they have a cases in court, sometimes we send a lawyer. Yeah, so it is on case-by-case basis. So the lawyer could go there, monitor, and report to us. If they want the case reported to the police, the same thing. So this is how we try to intervene. But the only thing we do is that we want to make sure we are there for them. Because what happens is that when you're accused, your parents will desert you. Even if they will be physically there, they will not be emotionally there. Yeah, that's the problem. But you know that they are not emotionally there. They're physically present, but so much emotionally absent and in fact emotionally hostile towards you. So that is what we are trying to do. And also, I will also have to mention that we also had a case recently in a neighboring state. It was an elderly woman, and we think that she had dementia because she left her home and started loitering, but she couldn't find her way back to her residence. And incidentally, she walked into a church, which is often where people go normally and all that, especially in communities. But there's a prophetess. The person in charge of the church is a woman, and they call her prophetess. So when the prophetess saw her, she started making all sorts of allegations. They call it ministrations, they call it prophecies and things like that. So they accused her that she was like a bird that crash landed in the church and a witch. So they started beating her, and she was pleading with them. The one thing painful about the video was that you could see her pleading and say, please, please, please. They were hitting her with stone and with stick. And eventually, I think when the police came, the woman was pronounced dead at the hospital. So the case is with the police now, and the prophetess has been arrested. So we have also met I have met one of the family members. So what we do is that we keep track on them and try to see whatever support. Like in this case, the police also charge them money for intervening. So what we promise them that we will refund them that money that the police collected from them. So just to provide them a little bit of relief, just for them to know that there are some people in the society who stand with them, because what happens is that when this thing happens, a lot of people abandon you to your faith. So that's what we do on case-by-case basis. But we also tell listeners that they could also reach out to us through our sister organizations. Donations can always come through our sister organizations, or they could go to our webpage and contact us directly, because we always need to be in the position to respond and provide basic support. It could be financial, it could even be physical presence, being there, visiting them and all that, so that they have this sense that there are people who support them. That's what we want to do. And we hope that it will get to the point where it will not be done. Everybody becomes an advocate. Not Leo or a few people traveling long distances, but people in the neighborhood could actually be there to do it for them. So this is exactly the process we want to trigger, and that's how the support they send us will help us fulfill our goal and mission.
Awesome. And what's the name of your Critical Thinking Foundation?
Yeah, it's a Critical Thinking Social Empowerment Foundation. Yeah, it's on the website. We have a website there, and there people can send us some donation, and it will get to us and help us in what we are doing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll be sure to have those links in the show description. But thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights today. It's very important to get this message out there.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And also thank you for all that you do. And like you noted when you did your oral presentation to the Maryland General Assembly, what you do there, like I said, is sends very positive signal here, because to exonerate victims of accusation 300 years ago is to send a message of hope to the victims of accusation today. Yes. So, because injustice is injustice, no matter how old. It doesn't matter whether it happened 300 years or 350 years ago. No, it is still injustice. And it also doesn't matter whether it happened to a black person or white person, American or African. It is injustice. And this is where the whole thing connects. So that is why I'm also saying thank you to you, Josh and Sarah and supporters, for all that you are doing to give us a sense of global justice. So injustice to one is injustice to all. So injustice to one accused, whether 300, 100 years ago or yesterday, is injustice to all. And the quest for justice for one is also the quest for justice for all. So I want to thank you for helping us make these connections. And I hope that at the end of the day, those concerned will listen to us and that justice will be done. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you again to Dr. Leo Igwe for gracing our show and telling such powerful stories. Those are really indicative of a lot of what we see, not just in Africa, but remember, this happens everywhere around the world, every continent, multiple countries on every continent. It's widespread and it's not unique, certainly, to any one place.
I've listened to a lot of these stories, but even hearing Leo today, when you reflect on what's happening in the community or the family, you can really put yourself in those shoes when you recognize that everybody's human and these are reactions to fear, lines getting crossed and misunderstandings. But it's, stories like these are the ones that make us realize that this can happen anywhere, and it is happening a lot of places.
Yeah, and talking about witch hunting in such a large continent as Africa, with over 1 billion people and covering the geography that it does, obviously it's a big subject and there's a whole lot we could talk about here. But there are some aspects of witchcraft accusations that we really want to highlight today.
You can check out previous episodes on all of these points that we make today, and you'll enjoy in-depth discussions on what's happening. The first thing that's important for you to know is that dementia is the cause of many witchcraft accusations that result in years of torture. These accusations are linked to misunderstandings of conditions like dementia, where unusual behavior is interpreted as witchcraft.
Because of this problem of people misunderstanding dementia, advocates are attempting to protect those who are accused of witchcraft in Namibia, and they themselves, the advocates, have faced threats of violence for trying to defend these people.
The charity in Namibia that is working to educate the community and protect these families who are experiencing dementia and witchcraft accusations is called Alzheimer's Dementia Namibia. And they work with the courts and victims, communities, educational institutions, and healthcare providers to advocate for the persons living with dementia.
Another condition that's commonly associated with witchcraft and improperly, of course, is albinism. Albinism is a genetic condition resulting in the lack of melanin, which is the substance that gives skin and hair its pigmentation. And albinism occurs in every country in the world. It happens to members of every race, every ethnicity. It's just something that you're born with.
Persons with albinism are often believed to have magical powers. And we're going to tell you why that's a big problem.
Yeah. And in some areas, persons with albinism are not even believed to be fully human.
Unfortunately, their body parts are used to prepare magical medicines or charms, often in the belief that the users of these parts will prosper financially.
Yes. And persons with albinism face some health battles, including skin cancer and vision impairments.
A dangerous myth persists that sexual contact with virgin persons with albinism can cure HIV or AIDS. And this leads to sexual violence against girls and young women. And it results in pregnancies, and it disrupts the education opportunities of these young girls.
Yes. And two of the organizations that we mentioned at the top of the episode, Sierra Leone Association for Persons with Albinism and the Source of the Nile Union of Persons with Albinism, they support persons with albinism. They've really formed strong communities that help each other out when people have different needs, including things like needing sun protective clothing and sunscreen, which are very important. Hats, long sleeves, long pants, very important because the skin lacking the melanin can't resist the UV rays. So it's very important to have those things. And these organizations provide that. They work out arrangements to get those donated, and then they distribute. And they also are tireless advocates in government and other institutions for the rights of persons with albinism. To learn more about efforts to support persons with albinism, listen to our interviews with the two people who have served as the United Nations independent experts on the enjoyment of human rights by persons with albinism. We spoke with Ikpanwoza Ero last year in the beginning part of the year. And then towards the end of the year, we had a conversation with her successor, Muluka Ann Mitty Drummond, who's the current mandate holder, the current independent expert on the enjoyment of human rights of persons with albinism.
We want to talk about something you may have heard about and just clarify some misconceptions. There's something that the media often refers to as witch camps. And these are refugee communities in Ghana, often, where accused witches, women, innocent women, have to flee their lives, and they live away from their communities. They've been driven out of their homes and from their families. Addressing them as witch camps really dismisses the vulnerability and the pain and the actual situation that are happening to hundreds and thousands of women in these refugee camps.
Yes, because they're women, not witches. So it's absolutely a misnomer to say witch camp. It's a refugee center for women who are fleeing. Like you said, they're fleeing violence and accusations that will, at the bare minimum, leave them with a stigma through their life that they'll be forever blamed for misfortunes in the community. So they seek out these refuge centers, and that's what these really are. They're not witch camps. Camp makes it sound like it's a summer camp, like it's a fun place to go. It's not. Individuals often live in squalid conditions with very limited resources. They're often taking care of their children or grandchildren, and children growing up in these communities and the women who are living in these communities really face a wide range of challenges. And that's where the two organizations that we mentioned in Ghana at the top of the episode come in. The Total Life Enhancement Center offers mental health clinics to the refugees in these refugee centers. To the women, they do provide counseling and other supports for mental health, which is obviously a big challenge when you've been so traumatized.
One of the things I want to point out about these advocacies and charities, often they are the only organization in the area offering supports. So resources to them are really critical, because if they aren't offering supports, there may be nothing available to some victims.
The Sana Institute advocates for people accused of witchcraft to be able to return to their communities, to their homes, where often they've lived their entire lives, their whole family is, all their friends and relations are, that they've been driven away from, and they hope to get them back to the communities. But this, as we said, the stigma remains with the women, and they may be branded as witches again if they go back. So it's really a sticky situation on what to do. There's efforts, legislation that passed the parliament, but has not been signed by the president, to eliminate these so-called witch camps, the refugee centers. There have to be provisions made to take care of these women and the children living with them, anybody who's been sent to these refugee centers. Next, we'd like to talk about traditional healers, which since colonization have been often known by the English term witch doctors. These often are the only medical practitioners who are available to communities, maybe for many, many miles around. These are the people, they're mostly providing herbal medicines, but in many areas, traditional healers go through extensive trainings. They are trained on how to use modern medicines as well as traditional medicines. There might not be another clinic or doctor or nurse available in any distance that people can reasonably travel to. So healers are relied upon in many countries as being a tier of essentially of the medical system that's in place. So they're like another option, like going to urgent care or something. Traditional healers are seen as authorities. Their views are respected, and what they say is listened to. Unfortunately, some traditional healers continue to use their skills of divination, other practices, and rites to actually identify people who they say are responsible for acts of witchcraft. Often it's not a direct, it was Judy Smith who did it kind of accusation. It's more of I see a neighbor of yours who's tall and gray-headed and
Out to get
something
you.
like that, and out to get you, obviously. And you just know from your experience who that is. The traditional healer often finds out from talking to you and living in the community, knowing the gossip. Who could be blamed? Who have you had arguments with in the past that you're naturally going to blame? That's the person I'm going to blame too, because then you as the client think, aha, I knew it. That guy's been out to get me for a long time. So, it's that double-edged sword thing. We need traditional healers, but we hope that all traditional healers, as in South Africa, there is an oath that they take, or a code of conduct that they sign off, that traditional healers have to sign off on, which says that they will not identify people as witches. But in addition to people who get labeled as healers, there's also a wide range of magical practitioners in communities, diviners, seers, fortune tellers, who also provide these services.
Now we're going to talk about the children. Children are a very vulnerable category of witchcraft accusation victim. And there is a really important organization that has worked in multiple African countries called Stop Child Witch Accusations. It's a coalition of individuals and agencies, and they see the reality of what children are experiencing as serious harm and to their development as humans. And they really go in and work in communities to help bring a value to the child and to enhance protections for children. Unfortunately, parents accuse children, as you heard Leo say, and often accused children are kicked out of their homes. There's tens of thousands, if not more, of children growing up unhoused and completely destitute. And Stop Child Witch Accusations works in communities to advocate for these children through the community's leaders and to build an intolerance for this type of behavior and to, again, elevate the value of the children and their humanity, bring the humanity back.
Yes. So please check out our episode we did with Carolyn Gent of Stop Child Witch Accusations. That organization is currently supporting projects in the DRC and Togo, where church leaders and theologians are researching child witchcraft accusations and effective responses. And I'd like to talk about the laws that are on the books or not on the books. Legislation does exist in many countries against witchcraft accusations, but also against witchcraft itself. So these laws exist where part of it is still doing what needs to be done, which is banning accusations of witchcraft. But part of it is saying that witchcraft is real, which reinforces the idea in people's minds that witchcraft is real because you have this law saying that you can't do witchcraft, which means that people must be able to do witchcraft. So there's that whole complication. And these laws go back to colonial era. So many of them need revisiting anyways. They're 100 or more years old, and they aren't universally enforced. So right now we talked about in Ghana, where the advocates there are pushing for a law against witchcraft accusations, but that law might also push women out of the refugee centers called witch camps. So there's you can see how complicated it is to get a law. And then as we talked about in last episode, when we talked to Boris Gershman, he emphasized for us that laws alone will not make change. You need holistic change. But part of that holistic change is the law and enforcement of the law. So in many nations, these advocates we've been telling you about are really pushing to get laws enforced. Dr. Igwe talked about some of the supports that they give to victims, and one of those is to go to court or go to the police station and get the police to intervene. So laws are very important, but they're not the be-all, end-all solution to the problem. In yesterday's episode, we talked to you about the UN resolution that was passed in 2021. Well, in response to that, the Pan-African Parliament, so the legislative body of the African Union, has issued guidelines to member nations on developing national action plans towards eliminating harmful practices and other human rights violations associated with witchcraft accusations. And the Advocacy Against Witch Hunts, the South African organization that we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, did contribute to this plan with cultural and legal insights and data. And In Witch Hunts is here to amplify messages from all of these advocacy organizations and also to create a repository of information about witch hunts. You can help out by volunteering or donating to these projects.
Tomorrow is still Podcasthon, so we're going to tell you about sorcery accusation-related violence in Papua New Guinea. And there's a lot to learn about this under-addressed issue in this island nation.
Thank you so much again for joining us for Podcasthon 2025. Have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow, and we'll see you then.